then there's no exam. We do not assess children and give them marks. These are progressive evaluation cards in time. The objective of each educator is to work with each child in his classroom in order to push him to improve by himself. This is the difficult exercise of the educator. We are not in learning so that all the children at the end of the year would have 20 out of A's in French or math, or we are in another logic. The game or the playing, as you have seen in the slide, is has its many elements: interactive playing based on science, building plays, society plays, educational plays, games. This is the mainstay of the learning. This is the logic of the project. Children have a tendency in a native way to work in a project-based logic because they understand very fast that to attain an objective it's a process, because in an early way in their life they have learned to walk every moment. It's not one day, 1 second. A child wakes up one day at the age of 3 and starts walking. This is the learning. In fact, that we learn with them in preschool. Learning on this project is that we gain a lot of points at the same time. First, it's collective work. Children play with other children. Second, there are rules of games. They learn rules to live, to be able to live in society, and they learn also that you need to furnish some efforts in order to attain results. And this is a collaborative effort, that is collective effort. This is a fundamental point in the pedagogical vision that we implement with our children. Another dimension also is the contribution of parents. Parents are associated in all the units we create, because as the speaker said, the studies have shown that parents who are committed with their children, even if they are not going to do many things or lots with them, it's really psychological. When children understand that parents are there, either to participate in activities or through visits or through sessions, or sometimes we invite the parents just to discuss with him the case of his child. Children are in a better psychological situation, and here their mind is open in a more important way. Parents also, I just would like to share with you an experience we undertook the past 2 years. We organized in all of our networks psychomotricity activities between parents and children. We have had testimonial by parents. These are children of 4 or 5 years in urban rural world, and there are some parents who say that this is the first time I play with my child, because parents have a tendency to tell children go and play. Thank you, thank you. So, Mrs. Grant, we talk here about the role of parents, instructors, teachers, educators. How do you see the role of everyone and each one? How the educator is not going to step on the role of parents, and that parents should shoulder their responsibility fully. How can we distribute roles? I believe first the educators should understand that the first teacher, if you were to use this term, is the parents. The parents, and now since birth, even in the mother's tummy, we know that children look for their parents. This is the quality of our interaction, how we as a society, as a community, we talked this morning, we have heard this saying that it takes a whole village. In fact, it takes a whole system that will reinforce this idea that the parents should be the better teachers for their children. The why I believe, Sophie, you talked about the use of medias. Knowing Imagination Africa, we create small 2 minute long videos in locally in French, so that we can broadcast them on social networks, so that parents would understand how can we stimulate the child. What does it mean to play all the traditional songs, for example, that our grandmothers sang with us? All of these there was a reason, there was an impact on the development of the child. How can we start or encourage this interest, which was our tradition, to stimulate children? Second thing, and I believe it's very important, that the teacher find a way to validate the parents within the classroom. Once again, in our countries with our programs. One thing that we'd like to do is to see quite often the children would come to the classroom. We will talk about their parents, what they did, what happened during the weekend. How can we undertake a project or a study based on what the child has lived, has experienced with their parents? This is very important. It's very important the relationship and that the two parts do not see themselves as currents. So quite often we have the tendency, because quite often is the teachers are very well trained. They are graduates, and others. Above all, they will have to deal with parents who are not well trained. To see, and so quite often they ask the question if they are competent to be parents. And we know as soon as this idea comes in, we are always hurting the world of the child. This is, and so we need to involve the parents. How can we involve the work, the job? How can we validate the what the parents do within the classrooms? This is another way, but we also, in Imagination Africa, we take the idea in its biggest context. We undertook a study in Dakar at the beginning of the year where we asked the parents, what do we need? What do you need? What do they need to be better parents? They talked about public spaces in Dhaka. We have some concern with public spaces that allow children to play, and we have understood that they talked before about the systems of the mayor's office and involvement. I believe Angelique has put this as pillars, but it's very important that in our cities that we have public spaces. How can public spaces could be overhauled in a way that they can help the young children in the learning experience? There is also a lot of initiatives all over the world. I believe in South Africa there have been many initiatives that were done in market squares, in public transportation that allow small spaces of stimulation for younger children. I believe we need to see this question of the environment, review it, reconsider it. Where are the opportunities of learning in each environment, and where officials are responsible for this? These people who are responsible for this should see this from the perspective of how can I improve the learning of the small children, Mrs. Regalan. when
How can the community encourage, stimulate the role of the parents in such a situation? And briefly, so that we can give rapidly the questions to the floor, to the audience.
Thank you. Today we have learned about the nurturing care framework, which talks about early learning, health, nutrition, protection, and responsive care. So that responsive care piece is really critical, and it underpins a lot of the other things that we do. When combined with something that we are already doing, with ongoing interventions in platforms that already exist, these activities for stimulation and responsive care and supporting parents have been shown to have very good impact on children's developmental outcomes. So it's really critical that we do that. From UNICEF's side, we have been working with partners on two very important tools to do this. One is called Care for Child Development, and the other is called Caring for the Caregiver. So there are two packages. And Care for Child Development is a tool that has very concrete activities, cards, checklists, etc., that can be integrated, for example, with training that is already ongoing with health workers, frontline workers that are working with children and families and parents. So it's a tool that has been validated in about 23 countries already, and we have data that show that children are showing good developmental outcomes. But very importantly, the workforce that's working on it and parents themselves are saying it's really helpful and it is fun. The second piece of information that we got from experts is that the status of the parent is equally important. That communities have to work also with the caregivers. We have to understand that the caregiver also needs care. So it's not only the children, but we have to care for the caregiver as well. So in response to this evidence, we've also started developing an approach, a package, to work with caregivers and how can we reduce stress and promote well-being in these parents. There was a reference made, for example, to grandparents this morning in the keynote address. They are one population that if they are going to be a significant part of children's lives as they develop, then we should also be working with these caregivers to promote stimulation and responsive caregiving. I think Karima already talked about using spaces that are already available and how can we enhance those. That is definitely a second possible way. A third possible way is to look at how can we involve other family members to support the parents in doing that. A fourth way that we have talked about, yesterday I visited also the Daralomama, Omuma, so I keep pronouncing it correctly. It was a very unique learning experience for me. I must say congratulations on the concept. It was very, very helpful for us to see that and the potential for integrated interventions. So the staff, for example, that are working in facilities like that, just adding on to what they already know in the form of information or training, that would be very, very helpful. I'll be very short since I've been asked to be.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So my last question, and then we'll be giving the microphone to the audience. Madame Nodo, alors, on a vu comment on mesurait le système.
How we can measure the system and quality. That is, we measure quality of the system, procedures, teaching material. How can we measure the evolution of the child? How can we evaluate the impact on this child who has benefited from this supervision? Thank you. We have seen, I've had the honor to open the panel, and I'm going to come on certain conclusions, and I believe of great importance. We have said that early childhood is the foundation of human capital. We have said also that human capital is critical for the development of a country in the fourth industrial revolution and tomorrow's economy. We have also said that it's highly costly. It's not something that can be done at lower price, and that return on investments are high. If is important, if the quality is good. I imagine that you would like to know how can we be sure that our investment is in fact efficient and that children have gained positive development, and that they can progress cognitively, emotionally, socially, and from a psychomotorical point of view. Before going to this, I would like to underscore the importance of what my colleague has said. I participated myself to impact evolution, and an error that we have always committed is to measure directly the impact without measuring the process. If we do not measure what goes on in the classroom, the evaluation of the process, we cannot know when we have the impact, whether it is positive or negative. It's because the concept, or if the concept was bad, or that the concept was not put in place as it should. And observations in the classroom, so to see if the teacher is at the level of the child, he plays with the child, or instead of giving instructions to the child like a master on a pedestal, and that he would wait for the children to reproduce this. If we do not observe this, we cannot interpret the impact. How can we measure the impact? How can we measure development? The cognitive, social, and emotional development of the child, there is a number of tools. What I would like to underscore here is that many uses for this. Usage is to do a baseline when we don't know how children are developed. It would be difficult to measure their progress in the field of nutrition. My colleagues will talk about this in panel. We have chronic malnutrition, which is that which children run for their age. This can be measured. It is a proxy for physical and nutritional development for the child. In cognitive and social development, what goes on in the mind and the heart of the human being, it is difficult to measure. What we need to measure is, because it would be a departure line in Canada, in Australia, and in other countries, they have done a mapping of the development of children by regional zones, because this allows them to deploy public resources at the places where the cultural line is the weakest. That is, where children, for different reasons, be it poverty or lack of access to services, have less opportunities, and this is translated by less developed social and economic development. First, relationships to deploy resources where they are necessary, where children are good, and through services, through the family and the community. Maybe the state need to be less involved to make up for the deficit. But where there is a deficit, the children need you and need the states. The second use is that once you have this baseline and that you have put in place an intervention for a few months, 1 year, 2 years, and would like to know whether this has an effect. This is the second use of this tool, and we are going to redeploy to see if yes or no progression of a group of children has benefited from this intervention. Is it better or bigger than those who have not benefited from the intervention? This is the third intervention. I'm going to go back to certain consideration. The third intervention is that it is at the individual level. The other two, it was at the level of groups of children. Now, at the individual level, it can have evaluation of children that are done to accompany their progression, but also to allow us to have early analysis. Many specific needs of children, be they like glasses, wearing glasses, or difficulty of learning, could be analyzed earlier in early childhood. This would allow children to have access to have other trajectories and other pathways like other children. Now, there are many challenges, and I would like to highlight them because it's not an evaluation that is easy to do. The cognitive development, more or less, we're talking about the same thing when we are in Morocco, Japan, or the U.S. We measure this through forms. If this is this circle smaller than the other, is this a triangle? What are the colors? One, two, three, etc. Languages vary, but the concept eventually are measured in the same way from one culture to another. Social development is something else. What does it mean for a child of 3 years old to be well adapted, to be socially mature for his age in Moroccan society? Is it the same thing or the same question of the Japanese or Senegalese American society? No. I believe we were to put the question to the audience. I believe the question would be no. What does it mean? It means that the evaluation tools of these social competences should be adapted, should be contextualized, not only to the language, and of course you have different languages in your different countries. Many countries have different languages in their country, but also the conception of parents, of communities, of states as to what is it to be well developed from a social point of view. This is fundamental. And the last thing, and I'm going to conclude with this, is that evaluation should also be put at the service of the child. An evaluation that is done to penalize and sanction children, it would be counterproductive. I'm not going to mention any countries. We have seen this. There are countries where we use results of evaluation of preschool in order to tell such and such persons is not ready to go into primary schools. This is a negative example of the perverse use of the evaluation of children. Evaluation of children, be it at the individual level or the collective level, should always be done in order to improve the services, to give the child more tools, more services, in order to be able to attain his potential or her potential, in order to be able to contribute to your economy or your society of tomorrow. Thank you. You have microphones. If you have observations or questions or testimonials or questions, please do not hesitate. First, request for the floor, and I would like to ask you to be friendly and present yourself succinctly. Good morning. I am Aidi Gisl Habib Shavdas, Provost Fasl Anjra, between Tangier and Tetouan. That house is welcome. Uh, I'm going to highlight something that I see of great importance, which is that the child lives in a society of adults. That is to say, educators, men and women, parents, the neighborhood people. These people, they have values. They have certain things that are transmitted to the child. Do we always have good values? That is acceptable values. If we were to examine our society, we would find, for example, that whether our society or adults respect the driving code, traffic code. These are things that can be transmitted to the child. If they can be transmitted at this age, then it would be difficult to change them, as we have seen. Do we respect priorities when we get in line? We always want to be ahead, even if there are people who are ahead of us in the line, waiting line. Shouldn't we settle the issue with violence? The parent tell the child, nobody should beat you. If anybody beats you, beat him. There's no dialogue. The role of the medias is to work on adults also. Otherwise, even we were to do everything we wish to do, the child has society, has the street, he has his parents or her parents. He is going to submit to them. Even if we do something else, he will accept. He will be like his parents, like society. And thank you. This is a very interesting question as to the values, and children learn by observations from what they see. If we adults we do not respect the rules of civic rules and values, how can children respect them? We take two or three questions from the audience, and then I'll give you the floor. Is there any other microphone in the room? Good morning. I'm Shadim Lahfi. I am president of an association, ESPOD, in the region of Casablanca State. I heard with a lot of interest all the presentations on all the points. We are practically agree to be on the ground because we all also have preschool classrooms in the older city quarters of Casablanca, in the villages of Darbu Azza. We work on the ground. In fact, the call or appellation school or preschool can probably we can call it space for alertness of children. Otherwise, however, what is lacking is the school for parents. This is very important. All the educations we can bring in order to help these children to be alert and to have a cognitive system. You need to educate parents too. I don't know what's going on elsewhere. I know parents at the preschool level requires teachers to give homework to children. I have lived this myself because we organize meetings with parents and to sensitize them in order to tell them that learning we do here is a ludic one, is through playing, through games. We cannot give homeworks then. And this, for example, is something that is very well anchored in the minds of certain parents, which means that if they do not have um, homeworks, that is, they do not understand anything at school. I would like to take three other questions. There's a gentleman here and the lady. We'll have the whole day. Uh, in the name of Allah, Majid Al-Labig, director of the academy, regional academy of Dakhla Wad Dahab. Thank you for all the presentation, Mr. Khaisha, and whom I know. Thank you for the organization of the National Day. What I would like to say, it would be very interesting to be interested to the healthcare side of the mother and the child. I'd say what the lady Ibn Aki has said before me, that is, we need to be interested in parents and parents' schools. Why? Because there's the higher school of education has required the creation of parents' schools. Why? Because in a study that I read, I don't know when, we observe the, the poverty of the capital of our children, most of whom, I'm not going to say all of them, in vocabulary, in words. If we were to compare this with other societies, we find that the child of 4 or 5 years old, for example, I don't remember the exact figures, that is, there are 60, has 60,000, 70,000 words that he would know, whereas our children are very poor um, in word capital. Why? There is a problem we observe in our society that when we start talking to the child with with the words that make us laugh but have no relationship with the language, no, neither with maternal language nor with the Moroccan dialects, nor with classical Arabic. And so the poor child will be obliged to translate these words into dialects and in Darija, that is Moroccan dialects, and then he would be obliged to translate them into classical Arabic. And this is it is very important then to have schools of parents in order to facilitate course to form them, to train them, to educate them, and why not to require degrees for parents. There are certain countries that require degrees, that is before they get married they should have this. Thank you. That is before having children they need to have degrees also.
Miss, it's true that before getting married, that could be a boosting factor. Thank you very much. My name is Tez Fejjouf. I'm General Manager of National Agency for the girl child and the boy child. I want to congratulate everybody here for this success. I have some comments and questions. With regards to questions, I would like to know, to have some, how is training organized in Morocco? How do you train the tutors? How do you develop curriculum? Do you have an academic inspector who helps with the book writers, or how? Another aspect its input is how we take care of kids under 3 years. So we heard this morning that the child brain develops, the bulk of it is done before 5 years. So what are the things that are taken into account before they are 5? And to close, I am a mother. I'm going to ask, what is the input of the Moroccan government with the territorial authorities, knowing in advance that the development and the implementation of these policies cannot see the light unless the local governments are involved. Now, parental education. The last panel will talk about a new policy for integrated childhood. So we need to have integrated development of childhood. And I believe that lady who spoke to us before has tackled this. The gentleman who has a microphone, and then I will go back to the panelists. In the name of Al-Majdari, I am the deputy of the mayor of Tamara. I would like to thank the organizing committee who invited us to talk about this topic. Of course, the panelists are thanked for their inputs. I have two concerns, training and the environment. First of all, all the speakers have said that trainers are the most important elements of this process, but we need human development throughout the life cycle of a society. So, with regards to these trainers, first of all, where do they come from? Especially in some areas, because it's very important to understand the kids. The curriculum also, what is the period that is will be devoted to the training of these trainers, and where and when, and everybody has thought that this is a great investment and that it is important for the future of any society. So, with regards to the program that is delivered to these kids, the conformity cannot be generalized. It has to be adapted to the environment of these kids, especially the regional adaptation of these programs. Now, with regards to environment, proximity means that are there for the kids to develop, and what are the means available to the schools. We're talking about communes here. With the scarcity of funds, I believe that this is a very, very big challenge. And I close with the research. What are we doing when it comes to research? What are the means that are made in this research? Because this is something that needs to change along with the technological developments, habits, and things. Thank you very much. I know that many of you want to ask questions, but we will have the whole day to ask questions. So, what comes out of these questions? Values, civism, and parent school that was raised many times, training of trainers. So, how to uh, work on the parents and training of trainers. So, two words so that the others could take the floor. I'm going to take the parent school. I believe it's fundamental. The parents need to be supported. But beyond the parents, we live in societies where other adults are involved. So, stimulating the kids, take care of the kids before, after birth. If a mother is told, and if her husband thinks differently, her grandmother